The moment Garrett aimed his pistol at Samuel, the world fractured into a horrifying silence. The air grew thick with unspoken fear, and Samuel, a boy of barely 8, stood paralyzed, his young face ashen with terror. Elias felt an icy dread coil in his gut, the familiar helplessness from years past washing over him, a stark echo of watching Emma, his own daughter, struggle against the fever's cruel grip. Then he had been powerless. This time, however, would be different. Mercy, Samuel's mother, lunged forward instinctively, but froze as Garrett swung the gun towards her. "One step closer, and I paint this porch with his blood," Garrett snarled, his voice a chilling promise. Wade McKinley's men, their hands already moving towards their own weapons, hesitated, recognizing the brutal threat. Garrett smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. 7 armed men against 1 desperate businessman. I like my odds better when I've got insurance. He saw the child as mere leverage, a commodity, nothing more. His casual barbarity and utter disregard for human life sent a fresh wave of revulsion through Elias. It was then that Serafina stepped forward. Without a moment's hesitation, she placed herself directly between Garrett and the trembling boy. "Take me," she stated, her voice unwavering despite the grave danger. "Leave the children and take me. I'll go willingly if you promise to let them stay here safely." "All 3 of you, or the boy dies," Garrett replied, his voice devoid of any warmth. Without a word exchanged, Mercy moved to stand beside Serafina. Then Violet joined them, forming an unwavering wall of maternal protection between Garrett and their young ones. 3 women who had already sacrificed so much were now prepared to sacrifice themselves yet again. Elias felt something inside his chest crack. These women weren't just protecting their children, they were teaching him what true courage looked like. The kind that valued other lives as more precious than one's own. He watched these 3 mothers prepared to walk back into hell to save their children, and in that moment, Elias Crow realized that sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to refuse to let anyone else join them. The rifle in his hands, which had felt like a heavy burden for so long, suddenly felt light, almost weightless. "No," Elias said quietly, stepping down from the porch. His voice, though soft, carried an undeniable steel. "Nobody's going anywhere." Garrett, enraged by the defiance, swung his gun towards Elias. "Stay back, old man, or I'll—" The shot echoed across the ranch like thunder. But it wasn't Elias who fired. Wade McKinley's rifle smoked in his hands as Garrett crumpled to the ground, his weapon spinning away across the dirt. The businessman clutched his shoulder, cursing and writhing in pain, but very much alive. "Threatening children," McKinley stated grimly, working the bolt on his rifle. "That crosses every line there is." Sheriff Cale, momentarily stunned, started to draw his weapon, but found himself facing 5 armed ranch hands who clearly had no patience for corrupt lawmen. His hand froze on his gun as he calculated the odds, which had suddenly, irrevocably, turned against him. "Here's what's going to happen," McKinley announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "You're going to get your wounded friend there, load him on his horse, and ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of. And Sheriff Cale, you're going to forget you ever heard of Riverside Boarding House, or I'll make sure every decent person in the territory knows exactly what kind of law you've been enforcing." Cale looked around at the faces staring back at him, McKinley's hardened men, the 3 defiant women on the porch, Elias with his rifle still ready. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and most importantly, on the wrong side of justice. Without a word, he holstered his weapon and helped the groaning Garrett to his feet. "This isn't over," Garrett wheezed as they loaded him onto his horse. "Yes, it is," Elias said simply, his voice firm. "And if I see either of you on my land again, McKinley won't get the chance to wound you first." The 2 men rode away. Garrett slumped over his saddle, Cale's dignity trailing behind them in the dust. As they disappeared over the hill, An extraordinary silence settled over the ranch. It wasn't the empty, oppressive silence of loneliness Elias had known for so long, but the peaceful quiet of safety restored, a stillness brimming with the promise of new life. Clarabelle was the first to move, scooping up her daughter and holding her tight. The little girl, who had clutched Emma's wooden horse throughout the entire terrifying confrontation, now looked up at Elias with eyes full of an unburdened trust that pierced his heart. "Can I keep this?" she asked, holding up the toy. Elias felt his throat tighten, a knot of emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "It belongs here," he said softly, his voice thick with uncharacteristic tenderness. "Just like you do, if you want to stay." The three women exchanged glances, hope and disbelief warring in their expressions. "You mean that?" Mercy asked, her voice barely a whisper. "This ranch has been empty too long," Elias replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Could use the sound of children playing again. Could use the sound of laughter." McKinley clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of profound respect. "Good man, Thaddius. Your Sarah and Emma would be proud." As McKinley and his men rode away, leaving behind a tranquil dust trail, Elias stood in his yard. He watched the three children, now released from their terror, chase each other around the fence posts, their joyful shouts echoing through the late afternoon air. Their mothers talked quietly on the porch, their faces etched with the lingering shadows of fear, but also illuminated by the burgeoning light of relief and burgeoning hope. The sun was setting, painting everything in warm golden hues, and for the first time in 15 years, Elias wasn't dreading the approach of night. He felt a lightness in his chest, a sense of belonging that was foreign and profoundly right. Clarabelle walked over to him, her daughter still clutching the wooden horse. "Thank you," she said simply, her eyes meeting his own, "for everything." "Thank you," he replied, a genuine warmth spreading through him, "for reminding me that some things are worth fighting for." That evening, as lamplight spilled from windows that had been dark for too long, and as children's laughter echoed through rooms that had forgotten the sound of joy, Elias Crow realized that sometimes the greatest courage isn't found in facing your fears alone. Sometimes it's found in letting others stand beside you, in choosing to protect rather than withdraw, in opening your heart even when you're afraid it might break again. The three women made his ranch their home, a sanctuary of peace and burgeoning life. Clarabelle, with her quiet strength and keen intellect, eventually began teaching the children of the ranch and even a few from the distant edges of the territory, building a small makeshift schoolhouse near the main cabin. She found immense satisfaction in nurturing young minds, a stark contrast to the darkness she had fled. Mercy, ever practical and resourceful, discovered a hidden talent for baking, transforming the once empty kitchen into a haven of warmth and delicious aromas. Her small bakery, initially serving only the ranch, soon became known in the nearest town, attracting visitors with the promise of fresh bread and pies. And Violet, with her gentle hands and deep connection to nature, tended the long-neglected garden behind the house, coaxing it back to vibrant life. Under her care, it bloomed with an array of vegetables and herbs, providing sustenance and beauty. And Elias, the solitary rancher, he discovered that the man he'd buried with his family had never truly died. He'd just been waiting, in the long silence of his self-imposed exile, for a reason to live again. He found himself spending hours teaching Samuel and Caleb about the land, about tracking and carpentry, his gruff exterior slowly melting away to reveal a patient, caring mentor. He even found himself sharing stories of Sarah and Emma, not with pain, but with a quiet, loving remembrance, knowing that their spirits now lived on in the laughter and life that filled his home once more. The ranch, once a monument to his grief, was transformed into a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope in the vast, unforgiving landscape. The echoes of his past grief slowly faded, replaced by the vibrant echoes of dawn. The sound of children playing, women singing, and a man finding his way back to life, not alone, but surrounded by a family he had never sought, but now cherished more than anything. The days that followed the confrontation with Garrett and Cale settled into a rhythm Elias Thorne hadn't known for 15 years. The silence of his ranch, once a comforting shroud, now felt thin, almost fragile, replaced by a cacophony of sounds he was slowly learning to embrace. The soft murmurs of women talking on the porch, the distant clang of pots from the kitchen, and most profoundly, the laughter of children echoing across the dusty yard. Leela, Ilara's 5-year-old, quickly became the ranch's unofficial heart. Her boundless curiosity and the way she clung to Willow's wooden horse were constant, poignant reminders of Elias's own lost daughter. She would follow him around the yard, her tiny footsteps kicking up dust, her questions innocent and persistent. "Mr. Elias, why is the sky blue? Can horses fly? Does the sun go to sleep like I do?" Elias, who had perfected the art of monosyllabic answers, found himself offering explanations, sometimes even a gruff chuckle. He taught her the names of the wild herbs growing near the creek, showed her how to spot a hawk circling high above, and even one hesitant afternoon allowed her to help him mend a broken fence post, guiding her small hands with surprising gentleness. Samuel, Mara's 8-year-old, was a whirlwind of energy and a budding apprentice. He was bright, observant, and possessed a quiet determination that reminded Elias of himself in his younger days. Samuel was fascinated by Elias's knowledge of the land, by his ability to track animals and fix anything with his calloused hands. Elias, in turn, found a strange solace in teaching the boy. They spent hours together in the small workshop, Elias demonstrating how to sharpen an axe, how to mend a saddle, and how to carve wood into useful shapes. Samuel absorbed everything, his questions more focused, and his eyes alight with newfound purpose. "Mr. Elias, how do you know where to find water when the creek is dry? Or, could you teach me how to shoot like you did that bad man?" The latter question would always bring a shadow to Elias's eyes, reminding him that the peace they now enjoyed was hard-won and potentially fragile. The women, too, were transforming the ranch. Serafina, with her quiet dignity and intelligent eyes, brought order to the chaotic household. She organized the supplies, managed the meager pantry, and subtly yet firmly took charge of the domestic sphere. Her presence was a calming anchor, her voice a soothing balm. Elias found himself seeking her out, not for conversation, but simply for the comfort of her presence. He'd catch her glimpses of her, sitting on the porch, a book in her lap, or talking animatedly with Ilara and Mara, and a warmth he hadn't felt in years would spread through him. Ilara, initially the most withdrawn, slowly blossomed under the ranch's peaceful influence. Her knowledge of herbs and traditional remedies proved invaluable. She set up a small corner in the kitchen, filled with dried plants and simmering concoctions, turning the raw provisions Elias hunted into nourishing meals that brought strength back to their tired bodies. Her gentle touch and calm demeanor soothed Leela's frequent coughs and settled Caleb's scraped knees. She even began experimenting with a small patch of soil near the well, coaxing stubborn seeds into life, a silent testament to her growing hope. Mara, the most practical and outwardly resilient, took to the physical demands of ranch life with surprising ease. She helped Elias with the livestock, learning quickly how to milk the lone cow and tend to the chickens. She had a no-nonsense approach to problems, a blunt honesty that sometimes startled Elias, but also earned his grudging respect. "This fence ain't gonna mend itself, Mr. Elias," she'd declare, picking up a hammer. And soon they'd be working side by side, the rhythm of their shared labor slowly eroding the walls around his heart. Yet, despite the newfound harmony, an undercurrent of apprehension lingered. Elias knew that Garrett and Sheriff Cale wouldn't simply vanish. Men like them, driven by greed and a twisted sense of entitlement, didn't forget easily.
He doubled his patrols around the ranch perimeter, checked his rifle more often, and kept a watchful eye on the main road, the very path that had brought both danger and salvation to his doorstep. He was no longer just protecting himself, he was protecting them.
Weeks turned into a month, then two. The harvest moon, round and full, hung heavy in the night sky, casting long, ethereal shadows across the now bustling ranch. Elias had never seen his home so alive. The scent of fresh-baked bread, courtesy of Mercy's experiments, mingled with the aroma of wood smoke and blooming night jasmine. It was a symphony of domesticity that both comforted and unnerved him. One morning, McKinley rode out to the ranch, his grizzled face serious. "Heard you've got a full house, Elias," he boomed, a knowing twinkle in his eye. He surveyed the children playing, the women tending to chores. "Looks good on you, Crow." Elias merely grunted, but a faint blush touched his weathered cheeks. "What brings you out, Wade?" McKinley dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Heard some whispers in town. That boarding house, Riverside, it's still operating, but Garrett ain't been seen much. Word is he's nursing a bad shoulder and a wounded pride. But his benefactor, Lonchua Blackwood, he's not one to let a slight go unpunished." Elias's jaw tightened. He had heard the name Blackwood before, always associated with power, corruption, and a shadow that stretched over the entire territory. Blackwood was a man who owned judges, sheriffs, and the very air people breathed in the district. He was the invisible hand behind the injustices that had plagued Elias's family years ago. "And Cale?" Elias asked, his voice low. "He's still sheriff, for now," McKinley sighed, running a hand over his beard. "But folks are starting to talk. My men, they spread the word about what happened here. And the preacher in town, Reverend Albright, he's been outspoken about Riverside for a while. He's got more courage than sense, that one. Some folks are listening, some are scared." McKinley looked around, his gaze lingering on Serafina, who was teaching Lila to read from a worn book. "Those women, they're good people, Elias. And what they said about those contracts, about Cale turning a blind eye, it stirred up something." "It's not just talk, is it?" Elias observed, recognizing the tension in McKinley's posture. "No," McKinley admitted. "Blackwood's been tightening his grip. Land disputes, unfair taxes, folks being pushed off their property. It feels like he's trying to crush any dissent before it truly begins. And those women, they represent a direct challenge to his authority." Elias knew then that the fight wasn't over. It had merely shifted. The immediate threat of Garrett had been dealt with, but the systemic rot represented by Blackwood remained. He felt a familiar surge of the old fury, but this time it wasn't a destructive, isolating rage. It was a cold, steady resolve. He had a reason to fight now, a clear purpose beyond mere survival. The revelation about Blackwood deepened Elias's commitment. He began riding into town more frequently with McKinley, not just for supplies, but to listen, to observe, to understand the intricate web of corruption that held the community captive. He saw the fear in the eyes of the shopkeepers, the resignation of the farmers, and the carefully constructed facade of order maintained by Sheriff Cale, who always seemed to be within earshot of Blackwood's enforcers. Serafina, sensing Elias's renewed engagement with the outside world, approached him one evening. They sat on the porch swing, the same swing Elias had built for Sarah and Emma years ago, which now creaked gently under their combined weight. "You're thinking of Blackwood, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft but knowing. Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "He's the root of it. The reason people like Garrett think they can do what they do. The reason men like Cale look the other way. The reason my family suffered." Serafina was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her words precise and measured. "My husband, Thomas, he was a lawyer. He tried to fight against men like Blackwood in our old town. He believed in the law, in justice, but they found ways to silence him. Her voice trembled slightly, a rare crack in her composed facade. They burned our home, ruined his reputation. He died trying to expose their crimes. That's why I ran, not just for my life, but to keep what he stood for alive, to protect our ideals. Elias looked at her, truly seeing the depth of her resolve. He had only seen her as a desperate woman seeking refuge. Now he saw a warrior, tempered by loss, just like him, but fighting with a different kind of weapon, truth and conviction. He taught me a lot about the legal system, about contracts, about how men like Blackwood exploit the loopholes, how they manipulate the courts. Those contracts Garrett made us sign, they were designed to be unbreakable, yes, but they were signed under duress, under the threat of starvation, homelessness, and worse. Any honest judge would dismiss them. But there aren't many honest judges left, are there? Elias mused, recalling Cale's casual mention of Judge Morrison's gambling debts being forgiven. Perhaps not in the obvious places, Serafina countered. But the law, at its core, is meant to protect the innocent. There are always people, somewhere, who still believe in that. We just have to find them. Or create a situation where even the corrupt ones have to choose a side. Her words resonated with Elias. For years he had believed justice was dead, buried with his family. But Serafina, despite her own trauma, held on to a spark of faith. She wasn't asking him to fight with his rifle, not yet. She was asking him to fight with courage, with truth, with the very ideals he had thought long lost. Over the next few weeks, the ranch became a quiet hub of information and strategy. McKinley brought news from town. Reverend Albright, emboldened by the whispers and the women's story, began preaching more fiercely against the tyranny of the unjust and the suffering of the innocent. Elias, in his quiet way, started gathering evidence. He rode out to talk to small ranchers who had lost their land, listened to tales of merchants driven to ruin by Blackwood's demands, and meticulously recorded everything. Elara, with her gentle nature, discovered a network of women in the remote settlements who had also suffered under similar oppressive systems, some even from other boarding houses controlled by Blackwood. They were scared, but hearing that someone was finally standing up gave them a flicker of hope. Mara, pragmatic and direct, used her understanding of the land and her keen observation skills to help Elias identify Blackwood's hidden interests and connections, mapping out the vast network of his corrupt influence. The children, oblivious to the deeper machinations, continued to fill the ranch with their innocent joy. Lila would draw pictures of Elias as a stern but kind protector, her scribbles a vibrant contrast to the dark storm brewing around them. Samuel, now a confident young boy, began to mimic Elias's quiet strength, even practicing his aim with a stick rifle behind the barn. Their innocence was both a precious thing to protect and a powerful motivator. The first direct countermove from Blackwood came not with violence, but with insidious pressure. Supplies to Elias's ranch became scarce. Wagons from town, previously reliable, would get lost or arrive with spoiled goods. The price of feed for his meager livestock skyrocketed. It was a subtle chokehold, designed to starve them out, to force Elias to abandon his new charges. One morning, a lone rider, a young man from a neighboring ranch known for his cowardice, appeared at the gate. He delivered a chilling message. "Lonshua Blackwood warns you, Thorne. Stop meddling. Send those women away, or you'll lose everything you have left." He didn't wait for a reply, turning his horse and galloping away. The implied threat was clear. Elias had lost his family because of a corrupt system. Blackwood was threatening to dismantle his new, fragile family, to strip him of the very purpose he had found. The old anger flared, but Seraphina was there, placing a calming hand on his arm. "He's trying to isolate us," she said calmly, her eyes meeting his, "to make us feel alone again. But we're not." "He controls the town," Elias countered, his voice rough. "The supplies, the law." "He controls the perception of the law," Seraphina corrected, "and the fear in people's hearts. But fear can be overcome, and there are always loopholes even in the most tightly woven webs of corruption." That night, under the endless expanse of stars, the small community on Elias's ranch held a council. Elias, Seraphina, Ilara, and Mara. They discussed their dwindling resources, the rising prices, the insidious pressure. It was a stark reminder of their vulnerability. "We can't just sit here and wait for him to cut us off completely," Mara declared, her voice firm. "We need food, we need supplies, and we need a way to fight back." Ilara, usually quiet, spoke up hesitantly. "There are other trails, unmapped ones, through the canyons. My family, we use them sometimes to trade with the distant tribes. They're dangerous, but they bypass the main roads. Maybe we could find a way to get supplies that way." A glimmer of an idea formed in Elias's mind. A risky one, but potentially their only salvation. "And we need to hit him where it hurts," Seraphina added, her eyes glinting with determination. "Not with guns, not yet, but by exposing him, by showing everyone what kind of man he truly is. If Thomas taught me anything, it's that the truth, wielded properly, can be more powerful than any bullet." The ranch, once a solitary haven, was now a fortress, a symbol of defiance. And the silent rancher, Elias Crow, was no longer just a protector. He was becoming a leader, guided by the echo of a forgotten dawn, ready to reclaim justice not just for himself, but for all those who had suffered in silence. The stage was set for a confrontation far larger than he had ever imagined, a battle not just for his land, but for the soul of the territory.